Welcome to Tattered Capes, where we explore the best of aging opportunities and the potential they hold for our future in a fun, meaningful, and engaging format.
Even though our capes might be a bit tattered, the superhero in all of us has a lot more resilient living to do. Catherine Owens is the owner of CLO Consulting, a trusted aging well authority and advisor in innovative senior living solutions.
I'm joined by Scott Fulton, longevity expert and owner of Home Ideations, a national leader in living environment design.
Good morning, Catherine. How are you today?
I am fantastic, Scott. How are you?
You're always fantastic. It's sickening.
I know, I've been told that.
I thought today we could have a different show on some work I've been doing really around communities of the future. Stretch the boundaries of what we know and are comfortable with today and get everybody maybe on the edge of their seat a little bit.
Out of their comfort zone a little bit?
You know how I like to do that.
You really do, yes.
So I think it's a really good topic. I was able to just talk about this at a conference recently, and so it's top of mind, and so I want to bring it to the top of your mind.
Okay, I'm all for it. Let's go.
So what's wrong with what we have as options today in housing? Let's start with there, and it's a quiz. See how you're doing. And you at home, you can take this quiz too.
Oh, we're going right into what's wrong.
Let's get right at it.
Out of my comfort zone, what's wrong? You know, I think we have limited options, even though we tend to go or make decisions based on those limited options. And I say that because I myself, I don't want to age myself, but I find myself falling into those same patterns. And so if we're talking about housing for longevity, I would say as our kids grow and we become empty nesters, we start thinking about downsizing. And I'm going to admit I'm right now wanting to be in a neighborhood that doesn't have as many younger kids.
Yep.
It's quieter. I don't have to deal with kids on bikes when I'm pulling into the neighborhood. All of those things. And as I think ahead, as you know, work with older adults in senior living, and I can't tell you how many times I have heard someone say, I don't want to live around older people.
Right.
Even though they're their same age, maybe they're even younger than them. It's a mindset that we've been taught. I don't want to live around a bunch of kids. And then we get to a point where I don't want to live around older people.
Yeah, and that's just part of socializing, right? That's part of life, and if we get out of practice, it gets like everything, it gets harder.
So really, I'm saying I don't want to socialize.
But you don't want to be alone and isolated
exactly.
either.
So again, we're down to two decisions that are letting us control our choices. But
there's a path that people are on generally that is, if we're raising kids, we want to be in a neighborhood maybe that is close to schools. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a default for people, so they may move to a location that's for that. And then what you're talking about is one of the other models that I see out there a lot is the 55 plus communities, which I think gets at your point of I kind of want to be around people. I describe, mm-hmm. I'll be a little bit more brutal with it, that look like me, they're in my age group,
yes.
Right? They behave like me.
That I can have a conversation with.
Yeah, and they're in my same economic class
yes.
too, right? So we kind of all group together, only to realize that maybe isn't as enriching. After a while, it's easy.
Okay, I didn't say that. You did.
Well, it's just, in terms
But no, it's true. You kind of you want to have conversations that maybe make you stretch your ways of thinking or keep you engaged with what's going on. And really, younger generations allow for that. Or even the intergenerational, when you are with younger populations, you're with your grandkids even, you just... Maybe it takes you back to a time, it reminds you about things. It revitalizes your energy and your the innocence of humanity. Whatever it is, there's benefits to that, but we get caught up in those ways of thinking that we've always been taught.
I think it's the difference of expected versus unexpected. Mm-hmm. Like we all like routine, a certain amount of routine, but the unexpected can be stressful, but it also can be the nice surprise. And I think that's what, if life gets too expected, we kind of end up searching for some unexpected surprises. And having that balance, I think, is really important. And I'll say that the practical aspects of it are what happens with these is we tend to see these communities pop up. You can look at senior living communities, 55 plus communities. Well, we build them outside of any existing places. We've got to go to some place where the land is inexpensive. So that means we're moving to some, out on the farm, use that expression. So that's where these end up being. And so we end up being isolated from kind of people who don't look like us in our economic class and behave like us. And ultimately that is generally, everyone would, in the field would argue that isn't necessarily the healthiest place to be for anybody.
No, it isn't. And as you're talking, it's making me think just about some of my experiences, because any type of housing can be beneficial if it's the right time or the right place. And we both do a lot of just education on choosing environments that support what your needs are now and long term. But as you're talking, I'm thinking about just my experiences in senior living community, where I'll just give a name, Betty. And the staff always say, well, Betty just complains about everything. And at the same time, I have found myself saying, well, this is Betty's whole world. And so Betty is a lot more fixated on all of the little things because she really has nothing
Right.
to engage her mind with, nothing
Right.
to give her sense of purpose in the morning, nothing to...
New distractions.
Yes, and so it's interesting as we're talking that personally, professionally, in all these areas, we're needing to rethink and think outside the box. And I know you've shared that it's already here. We're just needing to apply it within the housing
Yeah.
sector.
Yeah. Well, as you were talking before, I can kind of come back to it there. In a senior living community, what happens when the grandchildren come to visit? The other residents typically want to engage, right?
Yes.
Right? It's
My grandson has been surrogate grandson to I don't know how many people.
right. So I think that really gets
Yes.
at the point of it. That they realize they miss being around that young energy. Not everybody, but most people do. So I think that becomes one of the risks. And so as I looked at this project, it was really, how do we manage all these risks associated with different points in life? And so really, as we look at health, as we look at life, we look at longevity, the thing that spans them all is connection. Right? Because we're connecting with kids, we're connecting with each other growing up. Life ultimately is about connection. In biology, it's about connections, but also in terms of emotionally, psychologically, it's really about connections. And when we lose connection, we become isolated, and that's when everything starts to go
Yes.
in the wrong direction. Right? So there's a theme that as I started to study this and come up with something to say, if we could build a community that had all the things that we wanted, it would also have to be accessible. And when I say accessible, I don't just mean physically accessible, but financially accessible.
Financially.
Right? Because it's not healthy to be around people who all have the exact same work history and income class that we are. That's important, right?
And I know we're not going to talk about this in depth today, but at the same time, not only do we need to be thinking about it, but as you're talking and you're saying it needs to be feasible financially, these are things we're going to have to start thinking about so that we can start planning for. Because one of the barriers I hear just all of the time is, well, I can't afford it. I can't afford it. And it really, I hate to say it, but a lot of us aren't planning for long term.
Absolutely, right? So
I mean, other than having a nest egg, but what are we planning that nest egg for?
well, and how big is it, right? Well, big is relative to a whole lot of things. There's some minimum you need, but I actually kind of come back and say, why don't we do a better job of planning? And I'll argue is that part of it is plan for what?
Yeah,
Like
we're not educated on what we should be planning for.
Or you haven't shown me something that I want to save up and work towards.
And
that's, right?
that goes back to our two options of, and we both work with National Aging in Place. And again, it's our desire to shift the conversation of what does that look like, because even that goes back to we have one or the other, black or white. These are your choices as you age and as you get older. And what you're saying is, let's open that, let's broaden that. Let's look at what that choice is, or what it should be and what it could be.
Yeah, it's a, and it strikes me that it almost doesn't exist anywhere. At least it doesn't exist on the residential side. And
yeah, but I am seeing a little bit more of it. I know that I've been contemplating relocating again to what you're supposed to do, to be closer to grandkids. And as I've started to look at communities, I'm doing what everybody does, and I'm looking at patio homes, smaller communities, and there's one community that I've looked at that has the option of single family home, multifamily home, and not apartment setting, but multifamily home where you have one home that
Right.
multiple families or generations are living in. So I am starting to see a little bit of that, not enough of it. And
Yeah.
definitely not what you're talking about, where it's, it takes a village, and it really is.
right. We have, I'll back up because I don't want to spend this whole time talking about the past, but I'll kind of say there was a point coming out of the 1950s where we had this great idea of we're going to start to build subdivisions. Everyone's going to have their own home on their own piece of land. It's going to be a quarter acre. So we're going to distribute everybody out. And how are they going to get there? They're going to need cars. So we're going to build a car industry to support it. So from an economic standpoint, through the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s, it was a great model, right? So that certainly addressed a lot of the young boomers' needs coming up. And now what we found is that that's not a very sustainable model. We see what's happening on the highways in terms of, as you start to grow that, you realize it's really hard to move that many people around on roadways. You look at the cost of housing today, well, what's the number one cost? It's the land value. And not everyone can afford that. And so we've ended up polarizing everything. So one of them would be the housing piece. We've either got everybody packed in some area with really high density, really low income, and we've got others that are, certainly on the wealthier end with really big empty lots, really private, but long drives to get anywhere. And so people are doing long commutes. So certainly there's opportunities in between. And if we know how to design for that, and if we had the opportunity to do anything we wanted, right? Because we know that we need to be around other people who will support the different types of functions that we're doing. So you could look at a village type community. Well, we want a doctor there, and we want a lawyer there. We want to have food available to us. Well, and we want some schools for our kids to go to. We need babysitting when we're young. We need caregiving when we're older. These are all things through the stage of life, and if you could have them in, we'll call Mayberry, for lack of a better term.
So we are going back to the past.
Sure. Well, it is kind of relative to when we think about the village setting. And oddly enough, if we look at what's happening in the migration and housing, it's not going to subdivision, it's not going to urban. The biggest trend is to move to the smaller towns because they're going back to connection. They don't want the long drive, right?
And even as you're talking about the subdivisions and the larger houses, again, we have been taught to buy bigger. We need the larger square footage. One thing I always tell the people that are struggling leaving their traditional home to a smaller setting is our homes don't keep us company. I mean, the walls that we live in, and I've lived in a suburb for years, and as you're talking, I'm thinking, there's times I know none of my neighbors.
Yeah.
Because I come home and I drive into the garage and I go into the house through the garage.
Yeah.
I leave, I get into my car and I leave through the garage. So it isn't even like the 50s or 60s where you're walking in through the front door and you're seeing your neighbor and you're waving. You don't see anyone because you're coming in through the garage, shutting the door, and
we're not at the A&W anymore looking at the neighbors. It's drive-through, so you don't even see people.
Exactly. You don't even stop and go inside and eat. Everything is about convenience, and It has taken away opportunities to even just have simple connections of
Well,
hello.
and I would argue it's really not about what we call convenience today is not very convenient,
No.
right? So if that food option was 5 minutes away versus 25 minutes away, right? What's more convenient, right? So and what's that travel time worth to you? Time is one of our biggest assets, and it's not going to grow.
No.
We're going to have less every
Yes.
day. So if we could design it really, let's shift. So I've called this town Sovereignty USA, and sovereignty is really around kind of our independence to
Yes.
have what we want on our own terms. You can have what you want. It doesn't have to be what I want. It doesn't have to be what you want. That's the whole nature of how you put it together and how you build strong communities. So we look at kind of what would be, what do you call it when you in a community when you kind of show off the features of a community?
Oh gosh, you are putting me on the spot.
You don't have to use the
Feature puking.
feature puking. That really stuck with me. And and what's wrong with just focusing on features?
Because everyone's unique, and really, what gives you quality of life? We all need the same basic things as you're talking about.
Yeah.
We need connections. We need all of those things. But how we get that, how we define that, where we find joy in that is going to be a little bit different for everybody. So not everyone's going to get excited that there's a library on the corner. My
Yeah,
daughter maybe
sure.
because she loves books, but the same features aren't going to resonate with
Right.
everybody.
So everybody needs this. Like everybody needs food, access to food. That's a common.
But what
feature.
type of food they like
Sure.
is going to be different.
Perfect example, right? So how do you break that out? What should everybody have? The basic. We all need water,
Yeah.
so we're going to make sure everybody gets clean water, and then we start to fraction it out from there. And ultimately, markets drive economies, and markets drive what's going to be available. So if you're the only one in the community who likes, I don't know, Indian food or Thai food or something, chances are there's not going to be able to sustain that within your community, and you're going to have to go. It'll be less convenient, but you'll be
Yeah.
able to get. You'll have to leave it. So things that from a health, general health standpoint is we all need green spaces. So depending on what our community looks like, when I talk about communities, I've kind of said this would be like a green space community, but we're gonna essentially, we'll tie this in as we go through or at the end of really how do we bring this into any existing community today, whether you're in an urban setting, whether you're in more a suburban type setting or in a small, more rural setting, the elements still apply. And that's really, it's just easier to kind of do a context of, let's just put this together as the ideal state. And then out of that, what can I pull or tease out of that to bring home to where I am and make it what that is there without me having to move? Ideally, could we all stay
Yeah.
where we are and get this? And that's really where we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
The answer is no, we all can't. Some people are going to
Yeah.
have to make some shifts, but they're making shifts already, which is really how we
Yeah,
started
and I
out.
think it's okay when we need to make shifts. And that's another thing that we get kind of stuck in. We've made this decision, we're here. We evolve as people.
Yeah.
We grow, things that are important to us maybe change, things that we find joy in change. So in a perfect setting, we can have Mayberry or Sovereignty, as you put it, where everything is right there within reason, and yes, going out and having it, other options, but I also don't want to get stuck in that's just the end all as far as life is evolving and we are
Yeah.
evolving. But if you could have your basic needs met to where it allowed you to continue having those fundamentals that give a person quality of life and allow them to really live their best life, age well, all of those things. It's about having the right environment.
Yeah, so as you're talking there, I was thinking when we talk about aging in place, right? Well, I don't want to leave my neighborhood is the
Yes.
most common theme. Like, so why do people want to stay? It's not so much off perhaps the building, it's really the neighborhood. And so when you think about if your community was designed around that to say, oh, if I could have it and I just this house was really designed for a young family, and that's okay. And I can move 6 doors down, and that's going to give me what I need for the next phase of my life. Most people would be okay with moving a few doors down the road to get what they want. It's kind of the whole with the senior living community, right? Where you come in independent living.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've got this is my church, this is my congregation, my ladies group is here, my hairstylist is here,
Right.
my dry cleaner. So there's, even when there's change, there's familiarity, there's people, there's established relationships. I don't know how many times I've helped someone move to another location based on their needs, and they want to stay within that radius because
Sure.
of doctors, because of hairstylists, because of bridge clubs, because of even tennis clubs, whatever it is. And so, to your point, if you can have that where you're staying in a central area and having all those needs met as they change.
Yeah.
And I think you and I have talked a lot about the term aging in place, and really we're aging in place from the moment we're born. So it's, for me, it's continually the being aware of what we need to put in place to
Yeah,
have
and
quality
when we
of life.
say place, really what we're talking about is the community around us.
Yeah, wherever we're at.
Yeah.
It's not one designated.
It's not sitting in this chair and not moving.
How boring would that be?
So some of the features that we start to see in these communities that are really well designed is, and I think you can speak to this one, is people will choose like golf carts and things. So we see a lot of the new vehicles coming out, the new concept vehicles, like from big companies like Toyota and Nissan. They aren't designing the big SUVs. They're actually going much smaller because of what they see coming down the road here in new community development. People are generally going to have a vehicle for doing their run around in their community, and then they may own another vehicle, or they'll rent another vehicle when they want to go on a road trip, or they'll take, said the other thing that's happening in that connection piece with autonomous vehicles coming in. So they're already rolling out now, certainly in California, autonomous vehicles that are passenger vehicles, that like a minibus that comes and picks you up and takes you to wherever you want to go. So if you want to get to the airport, these will be new ways to get there. You want to get to the train station. They're just different ways of getting there that aren't that much different than what we have today. But if you think about not having to own a car, how much money, like for most people, that is the most expensive piece of property they own that delivers the least amount of value. Their house is most of their equity, but a car is, drive it off the lot and it's losing money. Used cars, it isn't losing as much money, depreciating as fast, but it's still a insurance. Even if it's sitting in the garage, right? It's occupying real estate. If I could be on the main floor and not have to, like you look at storing a golf cart
Should be
versus
able
a
to
car.
pay rent.
Yeah, so these are kind of in the priorities of what are the things of making rent payments and getting the food that you want. Those should be top of list.
But even as you're talking, I'm thinking we go back to convenience and redefining convenience, because if someone doesn't enjoy driving, they don't enjoy dealing with traffic, maybe they don't feel comfortable driving at night, whatever it is, to have something like that allows a person to stay connected and involved in the things that they enjoy, and not have the hassle of car ownership.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just kind of throw in a little piece, since we're talking about transportation, of where the autonomous vehicles are going. So these are really far more advanced already than people realize. It's not simply putting an intelligent computer in a car to drive it. What particularly the autonomous vehicle of the future will be, it'll be talking to all the cars around it while it's going down the road. We have this ability to do it today. We just don't have enough massive vehicles to do it. So I could look at one example, would be an Amazon warehouse. The 400 robots all moving around simultaneously. Yes, there's a computer designing the system, but at the same time, all the robots know where each other are on the floor, and so they never run into each other. Between the two of them, they're communicating of how close they're comfortable getting to each other, and so one will follow, one will pause while the other one passes its track. So imagine on the road, right? We worry about, I don't want to give that up to a computer. Well, we could be a great driver. I should not say this, knock on wood. I've never had an accident, but that doesn't mean I never will. But that's not the point. It's who's the weakest link out there. It's the idiot behind me. That's who I'm always worried about.
And I'm
Right?
being this, I even think sarcastically, Scott, because as you're talking about this communication with the robots, I'm going, oh, why can't humans communicate that seamlessly? where they're always aware of where the other person is at, and the other person is thinking, and we're never running into each other.
Yeah, well,
but you know, I mean,
Yeah.
that's just me being sarcastic. But
Well,
I love that, the idea of where you're heading with that.
It's top of my mind because I've done, I don't know, 20 some hours of driving the last 3 days, and most of my time processing is following all the vehicles, like what's happening around me, what's in front of me and behind me. We do that as humans, except I can't communicate to the car behind me that I'm slowing down, other than I'm relying on them seeing my brake lights.
Yeah.
Versus, no, these two vehicles are talking to each other, and even if one system fails, the other one is essentially stepping in and communicating for them.
Yes.
So there
And
is.
if you are communicating to the vehicles around you,
This is
it's
the part where I'm supposed to
probably
pay
not
attention.
positive.
Right. Yeah, the computers will be far more polite in their
Yes.
communication, especially in some of the major urban centers. So that's a little bit kind of on the transportation piece. And so as we start to think about this, the other part I'll say on the housing piece is we will be moving to more density because of land prices and because people just don't want to drive an hour to get everywhere or 2 hours. Again, putting grandma out on the farm 2 hours away from town is the only place we can afford or she can afford to be isn't a great solution, right? So the solution will be how do we make it affordable? Mainly that's going to be land price. And so that means kind of how do we bring people together means density, but do density in a way where it doesn't feel like we're all stacked on top of one another. I generally try to give the building industry some latitude, but I'll say one place where we've done a really, really terrible job, if I say apartment buildings and townhomes.
And why is that?
We should be able to live in those and not have to hear what's going on, the argument with the couple next door or, somebody yelling at their kids. That is so easy, it is so inexpensive to solve that. Of places to save money, it just drives me nuts.
Yes, and I think that's, as I've worked with people over the years coming from the traditional family home on land, and I'm just going to say that is still going to be an option that people want.
Sure.
It is. I mean, I've
Yeah.
talked with people that said, I've always had a view, I don't want to see a building, I don't want to see a parking lot. That's just what gives them joy. But that is the hardest thing, is having to feel like you are right on top of someone and that you hear everything. You hear their TV, you hear them going to bed,
Right.
you hear them go to the bathroom, and nobody wants that.
Right, so that is a construction solution that exists today. Office buildings, right? You go into a commercial office tower, super high density. Do you hear what's going on on the floor above you?
I've never thought of that, Scott.
Right? Do you hear what's going on below? No, because we designed to a different standard. And this notion of, well, that's a lot more money, I'm sorry, but that is BS. We spend residential money in the wrong places. Like that is, so townhouses, to me, like what it costs to insulate between floors is a few $100s. And
You
on
know,
the
I
cost
have-
of a building,
yes.
this is like it's so I'll use the example of like we put in still 2 foot and 2'6" doorways as standard versus what's the cost of a 3-foot doorway? About $10 more.
Yeah.
So on a whole house you might spend again a couple $100 and have suddenly room in all your doors. But there's just habits that we've got into that we just don't know how to break out of it because that's just what we know how to do.
Wow, never thought about it.
Yeah, it's just when you start to look at it, I'm tough on builders on that one, and I'm not about to relent because it's an easy one. So the other piece of accessibility would be in terms of what equity, right? So again, that's kind of this notion of, well, we want everybody in has this economic class, we want them grouped all together, but then so we'll say the wealthy, well, they want lots of staff available to them. Well, where's the staff going to come from? right? So
Yeah.
ideally, that staff is you need close by because they may not be able to afford cars and things. So that's ultimately where you see these solutions work. And so you really need to provide a village setting where there's essentially it's affordable to a wide range of people, and that's really how you're going to allow those people more opportunities to kind of fulfill what their dreams are and what their capabilities are.
So we're talking about really options that are going to benefit us and that are coming down the pipe, but it is going to require not only that we change our way of thinking on where we live, the options, but what our communities look like. Because to your point, we have chosen to be in communities that are like-minded.
Yep. I want to go back here and find this number that I have in my presentation here, which is, oh, I went right by it. Oh, there we are. So the median value in terms of equity that Americans have today is total equity at retirement, $266,000.
Wow.
That's the median. Now, you'll hear an average, if you're not careful, it's 1.2 million. That's because the top 1% are so ridiculously wealthy. It pulls the average up. It doesn't matter. It's median. So that means half the people have less than 266,000. Half have more.
I guess I've been going off the average the
Right,
whole time.
because average and
And
median...
it sounds better.
Well, they typically follow each other. I've never seen anything so different. I study data all the time. You rarely see that average and median are that much different. Yeah, this is multiple. This is 4 times difference. Right? So median of 266,000, and this is an aging population. We need to make sure there are solutions for these people. This is half the population. Can't simply ignore them, and 266,000 is not much. So if you get up to, I forget what the numbers are right now, but if we said to 500,000, we're now into about just the top 25% of the population.
And if I think about everything that's available now for older adults, there really isn't much for that median income population, which is the majority of the population.
Right. And so if you just think about from what is going to be in, no matter what economic class I'm in, what is going to be good from a foundational standpoint, if I looked at from an economic security from a national standpoint, we really need to be thinking about these sort of things.
No, but as you're talking, having worked in senior living for almost 20 years, we do not build for that median income.
Right.
And I hear this from people all the time is I make too much to qualify for the lower income opportunities or housing. And I don't make enough to really pay for everything that's out there. And I think that contributes to so many people feeling stuck between traditional options is I can't afford it. But we aren't building, I'm just thinking about watching the trends over the years. It's who can build, the bigger with the more fancy, the higher end amenities, all of the things that are really catering to, again, one population being together.
They're essentially all gearing for the 2 million plus market, right? Which is fine.
Yes.
And if we looked at, so what's the underserved market here? It's not the wealthy. They have always had and will continue to have options. That's fine. And then there's the low income where we do have subsidies available for them. But the massive gap in between is what we would describe as middle America.
Well, and it's interesting because I'm thinking, with marketing too, we're always saying, not just marketing to the classes, but marketing to the masses. And we haven't done that with housing.
Absolutely not. It's it's unfortunate. And if you drive around and start to look at it through a different lens, it starts to become pretty obvious. Having lived most of my life in Canada, where there are natural designs in place to prevent the sort of things that have happened in the U.S. Not to say that it's perfect by any stretch, but you start to see the strength in having some planning around these things. So anyway, so I think as we again look forward to things that are coming. So we talked before the show a little bit about what's going to happen with labor or staffing. We've got this inversion happening, right, where the boomers are coming now, and the birth rate has been so low, it flipped around. So they saw their parents and grandparents have all the support around them. What's happening now, though, is now they're the older population, and they have a fraction of the people around to support them. So what we are seeing happening is the robotics from commercial applications are now starting to get ready to come into the homes, and so we're seeing from the robot companions, right? That just, it seems odd. I don't know that I will ever be able to replace my dog, and I don't have any real desire to, but at the same time, I don't have to go clean up after the robot. It plugs itself in at night, and maybe it's not all bad. I don't know.
I have seen that though with, especially when you start getting into like memory care communities where someone needs that companionship of a pet, but they don't have the ability to take care of the pet. And we might think it's odd, but it's amazing, the capabilities of something like that. Just again, thinking outside the box.
Yeah, and so we're seeing this now in senior communities of introducing robots to them as companion aids, or essentially they can almost become, like I've seen them in entertainment type settings with a group, and they're leading a, I don't know, like some quiz game or any number of things that that in some ways have different capabilities than a live person might. Like that you would come in potentially and do your dance routine for them.
I was going to say they're going to have better dance. I don't know. You showed me one dancing; they dance better than I do.
Right. So
maybe not you, but
again, it's a different offering, and it expands the options. But we will absolutely require robotics just to be able to keep up. So that's going to come. Say robots have been around when I was in industry 25 years ago. There were autonomous robots moving around the floor 25 years ago. This is not new technology by any stretch. It's got better, it's got faster.
It's already happening. I mean, how many people own a Roomba?
Right, yeah. I can't find my remote, and it won't work without the remote. I lost it when I moved. So the other piece around this, as we kind of think about it from the community standpoint, is there's a term everyone uses that, well, I want to maintain my independence.
Oh, gosh.
And it's really not about independence, right? The thing you want to maintain, you really, I think, speak to this one, is dignity.
Dignity and identity is something I have learned that we associate independence with. And when I say identity, it is the things I enjoy, the things that give me joy, the things that I define as quality of life. And so being, let's just say, being in your community of sovereignty, if it allows you to have that independence that allows you to continue doing the things that you enjoy doing, that to me is what it's about, and not defining a location as independence or a type of house as independence. But
yeah, and the other thing I add into that is interdependence, right? Because that goes back to this connection theme of no one does very well on their own for very long.
No.
We need people around us providing, to support us in the areas like, if I want to go out for dinner, I'm relying on that cook to prepare good food, safe. I'm relying on the server to deliver what I ordered. Right? This is all interdependence at work every day. This idea of independence, to me, people think about isolation, and I don't want to have to interact.
Yes, or I can do it myself.
Yes.
And just because you can do it yourself, it doesn't mean, I have a 30-year-old daughter, and she said, I love to be mothered. And I don't think it's being mothered because she's very independent, she manages her life well. It's knowing that somebody cares, that somebody's checking in on her, that someone's saying, hey, I see you're having a rough day. Whatever it is, but it's okay to have that interdependence, and it doesn't mean that you're any less capable.
Right. It's just getting reacquainted with a different model, right? And once you're there, it's interdependence is there when we start to think about it. I think it's just helpful to remind ourselves how much we do rely on others for little things that we kind of take for granted. So I kind of want to take it now to say, like, what does this community look like? And so we can look at existing villages around the country today, and we can look at, say, for example, the villages in Florida, just outside Orlando. I think there's 170,000 people live in there, covers 3 counties.
That's larger than some major cities.
Yeah, they call it a village, but it's really not. But it is a guide there. And Sun City, there's a number of Sun City villages. I was touring the one down in Arizona outside Tucson in California as well. And they provide some models of, given the choice, these are what people choose to do. The limiter there, of course, is that those are all southern destinations and generally built around that, and that's great. There's one of the reasons I'm not in Canada, and weather is one of them. So that's very real. But at the same time, it shouldn't only be a southern destination. And so part of this is, how do you build this system in? And so one of the things we're seeing, again, it's this connection. I'll kind of bring in what's happening through commercial architecture is more and more connection between the high-rise towers. So it's no longer you just go down to the floor and you go across to go, and then you go up to the next one. Or there's now multiple towers being built with multiple connections, and these connections aren't just a walk across. They're parks, they're open spaces, some with swimming pools.
So when you say high-rise, not just commercial, professional buildings, these are also residential as well, or mixed use?
They will be mixed use,
Okay.
right? So that's what's happening now. They're realizing it's costly. I mean, if you're building in the center of an urban city, the land values are ridiculous, and it is expensive to build that high vertically. But if that's where you want to be and that's where you need to be, that's clearly where people want to be. So so you'll typically see a mix of commercial, typically on the bottom, residential more on the top, where people will pay for the view. But there's nothing magical as you go from one floor to another. But so it is this starting to realize, like, to have a commercial building above or below you would be fine. Now, if you want to play your boom box or something, you might manage to break through even the commercial sound barrier. But
it's interesting because I hadn't really realized that it is all around me. I'll say that I've been doing this bi-coastal thing between my suburbia house and East Coast near my daughter, and looking for just those apartments, inner city, small, kind of easy to come and go places. And it has been interesting because as I've been looking at different options, I've been surprised that there's restaurants, bowling alleys, bars, green space, all of these things that I wouldn't think typically go with an apartment downtown. That it's just that mixed use.
Yeah.
And again, designed to provide community and connection, and not just a place to live and come and go.
Right, and so when you start to put mixed use in, it also gives you mixed opportunities around accessing equity. Right, so a business comes in with equity, but a homeowner. So a homeowner is sitting on they sell their home for, I don't know, whatever number, $500,000, whatever, and a certain percentage of that is equity that they can now apply and bring in, or there can be rental options as well. So that's kind of the one piece that deals with this mixed use, because then, if you wanted to work, theory, you could live and work in the same building. Whether you could be in a home office and I could be going to my office that's 3 floors away, for example. There are all sorts of things naturally happen when you do that. The other maybe to switch over here is schooling is a big part of it, right? So if we look at what's happened with schools over our lifetime, it's happened across the country, like constantly closing schools because they are so costly, because of, you look again, the land value, the cost of that building, and how little it gets utilized over the course of a year. One of the many silver linings of the pandemic was hybrid learning. And so clearly that's going to happen now with education across the spectrum. So from preschool, primary, elementary, and high school, even potentially into college, I think we'll start to see that is going to eventually, they're going to run out of unlimited
Yeah.
funds, and into lifelong learning. And so we start to think about a building now or a space that has the ability to serve primary, elementary, secondary, and lifelong learning. We'll assume college is still going to be a separate experience for different reasons. It's now a building that you can access far more hours of the day and get far more value out of that and maintain it, and again have your community school there. And it's so we now start to, so if you didn't have to drive or bus your kids to school, that's quite convenient, right? This whole idea of convenience to me is...
It is convenient, and it is a constant, I think, struggle, because we've realized through the pandemic that that is a viable option. And we have also realized that we still need that interaction.
Right.
So finding that balance, and if you have an opportunity to have a location or a community or environment that gives you both, to me, that's convenience.
Right. Right. And so what you need, what your needs may be different than others, but some ability to adapt to that. And I think that's one of the great opportunities. And then when the community is right size, so we say right size, if we were going to go out and do this as a standalone, we'd probably be looking at about 4,000 acres. We'd probably be looking at about 20,000 homes. So that's, we'll say nominally that's in around the 40,000 people kind of population size. We'd have education, essentially lifetime access to education. That's big enough now that you can have all of your professional services there. So whether it's for seniors, we could say for elder care law services, for legal across whatever business needs you need, medical, professional services, accountants. You're going to have stores and markets to serve that. You may not have the big grocery store necessarily, but maybe that's your 1 week outing. But most of them deliver now anyway, right? So it starts to get, and then so you've got reason there for space for entertainment, golf and hiking, streams like water, fishing, and all. You start to realize there's a whole lot of things that you could probably satisfy 90% of your typical weekly use is provided within the community, which means that goes back to this small vehicle. And you will inevitably start to get to know your neighbors.
You will. Which can be a really good thing. I'm just thinking out loud, but even, we go back to this median income and not having options that really support everything. I kind of look at something like that where you can have, because everybody is coming together and everybody is, bringing the shared equity or resources in a sense, as far as just you've got everything right there and convenient. It opens up your world. I think it opens up someone's world to have a lot more viable options for being active, engaged, involved in a community, and also having green space, walkability, all of those things, sense of community, but also retail and all of the other services that we kind of have separated for so long. It just does, to me, it seems a lot easier and better quality of life.
Yeah, and the idea is it would give you something now to look forward to and something to plan towards and something to save. And
So what you're saying is I need to be open to getting to know my neighbors.
Well,
so I can start planning.
We can't guarantee.
I love my neighbors.
Yeah, that's always the risk when you move, right? Is your neighbors. So anyway, so kind of wrapping it up here is these are elements of what we'll call a concept community. The idea now is how do I bring it back to my community? And the reality is there's far more options than what people realize. But I'll say the hardest solution is if you live in a suburb.
Well, and I think the easy thing for us to just start doing today, if we were to say a takeaway, is to just be open to different ideas of what lifestyle, quality of life, all of those things, and start thinking about what gives me quality of life. What do I want? What do I need to maintain that? Because we're not stuck in option A and B that we've been taught to kind of be stuck in. There's a lot of different options, and so really start thinking and planning ahead on if this is something that is going to be what I look forward to, how do I plan for that?
And what I will say is this is the trend. This isn't some kind of pie in the sky. This is all taken off of what we already see happening either in the residential, but we've seen it already in the commercial side, moving more into the residential access. And so keeping our eyes open for what's coming and looking for something to say, well, that's the right kind of community. It's got the elements that we're talking about, and it's a location that I think would work for different reasons. I mean, when it comes time to think about changing our place, everything's on the table. Right?
Yes.
So that's what we're looking at. So that's been fun. Thanks.
It's always
I'm excited
fun.
about this. There's lots of projects in the works around this, I think, and that's really how do we integrate it into existing communities. I think that's one thing with National Aging Place Council. We get to get access to help out the professional developers who clearly need help in looking outside the box they've been used to working with, and ultimately it's I think there's lots of good things to look forward to.
There is, and you always give me lots to think about, Scott.
Well, get everybody out of their comfort zone a little bit, and now
Okay.
we'll give everybody a big hug, and we'll all be good. Everybody relax now. Okay, thanks.
Thanks again. You have a fantastic day.
Thanks, you too. This was a great conversation. Again.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Tattered Capes. To learn more about the show, visit tatteredcapes.com and subscribe on your favorite platform. Until then, stay curious and remember, the superhero in all of us has a lot more resilient living to do. See you on the next show.